The flagship of the Resistance fleet is one of the coolest Mon Calamari ships ever made. I think it's time we took a closer look at it. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and this is the MC85 Star Cruiser. Design. The Mon Calamari Shipyard's Corellian Engineering Corporation MC85 Star Cruiser was externally a fairly typical Mon Calamari design, albeit an abnormally large one. It featured the usual smooth, oblong hull dotted with equipment blisters housing its weapons, sensors, and more. Its bridge was located on the top of the ship towards the front, fairly well embedded in the ship compared to the exposed command pod of the MC80. It also had an emergency bridge in roughly the same position on the underside of the ship. One of the most interesting features of the MC85 was also located near the front of the ship on the bottom, that being its ion scoop particle collector. Very little is known about this piece of equipment, but presumably this functioned as an analog to the Bussard collectors seen on Star Trek ships, allowing it to collect interstellar hydrogen particles to extend its range and improve its fuel efficiency. The middle of the ship held its two hangar bays and several antennae, and it had 11 ion engines at the rear, 1 large, 6 medium, and 4 small. Internally, the MC85 was quite different from other Mon Cal cruisers. It was a joint venture between MCS and CEC, and as such was built to be more amenable to terrestrial species than Mon Cal ships normally were, though it still had waterways for Mon Calamari personnel and other aquatic species. I personally believe that the Defender-class cruiser was the first prototype of this idea, as it had a similar look to the MC85 at a much smaller scale. In fact, it looks like it has even more CEC influence than the 85 does, even though they aren't officially listed as having contributed to it. Anyway, the MC85 was very technologically advanced. It was highly automated and could be run effectively by only a couple hundred crew despite its enormous size. The ship's main bridge was outfitted with an excellent battle coordination suite that allowed the command crew to view both the overall battle on a large holotable in the center of the room, and the status of all the individual starfighters assigned to the ship on additional displays. Its shields were also exceptional. They were an experimental design that could sustain enormous amounts of turbolaser fire without failing. They were projected in a bubble several dozen meters above the surface of the ship's hull. We don't know if that means anything, but I believe that this allows the shield to dissipate energy across its entire surface much more effectively than on a traditional shield that follows the contours of a ship's hull, where the energy may become concentrated in the shield's sharp edges and overwhelm it more easily. We don't know a whole lot about how shields work in Star Wars, and it more or less boils down to however a particular story requires them to, but this seems plausible to me. Furthermore, the distance from the hull could also allow shots that break through the shield to at least partially dissipate before striking the hull, further reducing the chance of the ship being damaged, and the severity of that damage, though the previous disclaimer still applies. Specifications. The MC85 was one of the largest Mon Calamari ships ever made, at a size of 3,438.37 meters long by 706.55 meters wide and 461.61 meters tall. It had a Class 2 hyperdrive and an unknown top atmospheric speed, possibly around 975 kilometers per hour like the MC80. It was very weakly armed compared to the MC80 though. To comply with the New Republic Military Disarmament Act, it was extremely heavily shielded, but armed only with 18 heavy turbolasers, 18 heavy ion cannons, 12 point defense laser cannon turrets, 6 proton torpedo launchers, and several tractor beam projectors. This was still plenty, but compared to its predecessors' 36 quad heavy turbolasers, 36 ion cannons, and 80 quad laser cannons, it was quite bare, especially considering it was roughly 3 times the size of the MC80. Its starfighter capacity was not particularly impressive either, though I'm not sure if it was intentionally low or if the Resistance just didn't have very many starfighters to go around. It could carry at least 7 T-70 X-Wings and at least 4 RZ-2 A-Wings, though I would think it could carry a bare minimum of 1 squadron of each, especially considering it also had room for 4 squadrons of MG-100 Star Fortress bombers and 30 U-55 orbital load lifters. Considering the size of the MG-100, I would think it could fit at least 4 times as many regular starfighters as bombers, for a combined total of 18 squadrons with no bombers. The highly automated MC85 had a crew of just 1,139, and it could be operated by as few as 210 without losing much operational capacity. It could also carry what is stated to be more than 219 passengers, though based on its immense size and low crew count, I would guess the actual max passenger capacity to be in the thousands. Its cargo capacity is also unknown, though we do happen to know it is composed of 60 modular storage compartments. The MC-80 had a cargo capacity of 20,000 tons, so I would guess the MC-85 to have a capacity of 60,000 tons. Its price is unknown as well. I wouldn't go so far as to triple the price of an MC-80 for the MC-85, as it had far fewer expensive weapons, and CEC's influence on the design probably made it much more structurally conventional than normal Mon Cal cruisers, and thus less expensive. We'll settle for a little more than double the price instead, and estimate its price to be about 250 million credits. History. Relatively little was known of the history of the MC-85. It was designed for the New Republic Navy and probably entered service sometime around 20 ABY. The class was retired sometime later due to the lack of both a political and strategic need for heavy warships of this size at the time. By far the most famous of these ships was the Dawn of Tranquility, which ended up in the hands of the Resistance. Admiral Akbar renamed the ship to the Raddus in honor of the first Mon Calamari captain to join the rebellion in the Galactic Civil War. The Raddus was stripped of all unnecessary systems to make it even less crew-intensive to suit the Resistance's personnel shortage, and made it the flagship of their meager fleet. Unfortunately, almost nothing is known of the ship's service to the Resistance either, other than its final mission. After the destruction of Starkiller Base in 34 ABY, the Resistance was tracked back to their base on Dakar and attacked by the First Order before they were finished fueling their ships. They evacuated the ground base crew to the Raddus just in time before it was obliterated by the First Order Dreadnought's orbital cannons, and the fleet escaped to a rendezvous point in the Ochi system. However, they were tracked there by the First Order flagship, the Supremacy, and the Resistance command staff decided to make a break for the Crate system at sublight speeds to conserve fuel, as their ships could outrun the First Order fleet this way and stay out of range of their main guns. However, disaster struck when First Order TIE fighters attacked the Raddus and destroyed its starfighter hangars and main bridge. All of its command crew, save for General Leia Organa, were killed, and she was knocked unconscious. The ship and fleet continued on under the command of Vice Admiral Haldo for several hours, if not days. The timeline is not abundantly clear. As the smaller ships ran out of fuel and fell back from the fleet, or stopped accelerating and fell within range of the First Order, for those of you who want to be pedantic, their crews were evacuated to the Raddus and they were picked off. When the ship got within lifeboat range of the planet Crate, the crew and passengers of the Raddus evacuated aboard its U-55 orbital load lifters, and Haldo stayed aboard to go down with the ship. She turned it around to face the Supremacy and engaged the hyperdrive, sacrificing herself and the ship to cut the First Order flagship in half and destroy 20 of the Star Destroyers following or docked to it with a spray of superluminal debris. This may have been the end of the Raddus, but many other MC-85 cruisers lived on. None of their stories have yet been told, but several of them made it to Exegol around a year later in 35 ABY, where they were among the thousands of ships present for the final defeat of Emperor Palpatine. And that's everything there is to know about the MC-85 cruiser and the Raddus. Please let me know what you think of this ship and what else you'd like to see in the future. In fact, please leave a comment about literally anything except the hyperspace ramming scene. I've never really understood why everyone thought that was so unbelievable. The first thing we ever learn about hyperspace in Star Wars is that bad things happen to you if you run into something in hyperspace, so it stands to reason that bad things would also happen to whatever you run into as well. I have a hunch that if it happened in any other Star Wars product, or was done by any other character, it wouldn't have been nearly as controversial. I would like to make a video about hyperspace ramming one day, so save your complaints about it for then. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.